On a warm May evening in 1993, the auditorium of the private Jesuit school La Providence was crowded. High school students who attended Madame Ozier's theater club performed Jean Tardieu's Comedy of Language. As always, the success was resounding. At the end of the performance, the satisfied actors took their final bow with their beloved teacher. As soon as the applause reached its peak, one of the leading actors, the school's hope and star student Emmanuel Macron, couldn't resist and kissed Madame Ozier on the cheek. She did not push him away. The prank of a 15-year-old student who kissed his 40-year-old teacher in gratitude could not have caused anything but admiration at the time. However, Amiens is a small town, and rumors spread quickly here, and so the naive prank of a model student from an intelligent family is already becoming a local scandal, as more and more people are beginning to notice that Madame Brigitte and her student are spending too much time together. An unnatural amount of time. All her life, Brigitte grew up in Amiens, a city where several generations of her family owned pastry shops. She was the youngest of the 6 children of the Trogneux couple, and the only one born after the war. There was perhaps something karmic in her date of birth. Unlike her brothers and sisters, Brigitte was the most cheerful and mischievous child. She came of age in the 1960s, that wonderful time when the hardships of war were gradually receding and the income of bourgeois families once again began to serve the prosperity of French capitalism. Her love of life helped her naturally and almost effortlessly to cope with the deaths of her closest relatives. Her sister died in a car accident, and her niece passed away from acute appendicitis, while spreading to everyone around her a hedonistic thirst to desire, to create, to fall in love, to laugh. As the youngest daughter in a large family, she enjoyed an unlimited amount of freedom, recalls one of her childhood friends. Brigitte dressed in the best shops in the city, and for good grades at school, her parents might well reward her with an expensive jewelry set. By the age of 20, she was already one of the most fashionable and well-known young women in Amiens, what today would be called an it girl, who, however, very soon was engaged to the local bourgeois prince, André-Louis Ozier. But after arranging a magnificent wedding at the town hall, 8 years later, he almost peremptorily whisked her away, with 2 children and pregnant with a third, to the suburbs of Strasbourg, forcing her to leave her beloved city and her no less beloved job as a press attaché. Barely recovered from 2 maternity leaves, Brigitte was facing a 3rd child and the status of the wife of the director of the Bank of Foreign Trade, a position perhaps enviable but hardly in the spirit of the future First Lady. Having moved east, young Madame Ozier would have gone utterly mad with boredom had she not, one day, set aside her beloved dog-eared copy of Madame Bovary, recalled her gift for making friends, and taken up politics, naturally at the local level. In 1989, she even ran for a seat in the local legislature, promising to open skate parks across the city and to simplify housing rentals for young families. Yet, despite her determination, she lost the election, as her neighbors later recalled, only because she was a newcomer to the ossified town of Treuchtersheim. At the same time, Brigitte plunged headlong into another of her passions, teaching, to which, because of her early marriage, she had never been able to devote a single moment, despite having studied literature at university. Fortunately, she did have both a diploma and the necessary certificate, along with the right to teach languages and literature, though only to school children. From then on, she taught wherever she could, in Treuchtersheim, in downtown Strasbourg, and even in Paris. But in 1991, her family felt an irresistible pull back home to her native Amiens, where André-Louis returned to finance, while Brigitte took a position as a teacher and drama club instructor at the Jesuit college La Providence. By then, a local wunderkind, Emmanuel Macron, had already been studying at the school for 2 years, in the same class as Brigitte's eldest daughter, Laurence. Emmanuel quickly became friends with Laurence, but without any romance. Moderately sociable and friendly, the boy showed no interest at all in girls his age, devoting himself entirely to his schoolwork, his lessons at the local conservatory, and his greatest passion, literature. Brigitte's colleagues recall that she never taught him literature formally, and yet, once he joined her theater class, Emmanuel preferred to hone his literary skills only with her. The teacher herself melted at the boy's talent, as indeed did the entire faculty. At times, she felt she was dealing with a modern-day Mozart. Brigitte was adored by her student. One day, she was explaining to us the concept of passion in literature, one of her pupils remembers, and insisted that sometime all of us just need to live for pleasure. She had a wonderful gift for helping us relax. As for Emmanuel, before kissing her in front of everyone, the young man had diligently studied literature with her every Friday. Madame Auzière was helping him adapt Eduardo de Filippo's The Art of Comedy for the stage. At times, he would read her his poems, occasionally lifting his embarrassed eyes from the page. It was probably then that something began to grow between them, something he secretly dreamed of, and she was even afraid to imagine. The pain of unrequited love drove the student, who was barely 15, to seek out Brigitte more and more often. They often remained alone together, and although no one will ever know if there was anything more between them than rehearsing plays, one thing is certain. His relationship with Brigitte inspired the enchanted Emmanuel to undertake the most daring literary exercise. One of these was an erotic novel in which the young lover prudently changed the names and gave it to his neighbor to print. She, also quite prudently, did not keep the manuscript, but still did not hesitate to admit many years later that the work was bold and quite frank. Meanwhile, Brigitte, increasingly recalling her former favorite heroine, Madame Bovary, and her destructive infatuation with the student Leon, tried to understand her role in this novel. It was quite obvious that her husband did not have 1/100th of the romantic potential that this passionate and talented young man, who seemed more serious than any banker in the world, possessed. Writing was just an excuse, Brigitte's friends recall her saying. In reality, I felt that we had always known each other. Formally, Brigitte did not even break the law. The age of consent in France is 15, and yet her reputation would have been ruined, and it was. A year later, a family friend told Brigitte Emmanuel's parents about the scandalous affair. They had been completely convinced that their son was dating Brigitte Laurent's daughter. The young man's father, Jean-Michel, nearly fell off his chair when he heard the news. His mother was much more restrained, but just as adamant. "Don't you see? You already had your own life. But what about him? You can't even bear him children." Burning with shame, the dismayed parents demanded that the lovers at least wait until Emmanuel turned 18. "I can't promise you anything," Brigitte admitted honestly. Funnily enough, his beloved grandmother Manette, who had also once taught at the high school, unexpectedly took the couple's side, but her indulgence was not enough. Emmanuel's parents were determined to send their son far away from Amiens and his wayward teacher. Where? Even to Paris, to the prestigious Lycée Henri IV. Emmanuel would be entering university the following year anyway. Jean-Michel and Françoise themselves never admitted that they sent Emmanuel to Paris because of his love affair, claiming that they were thinking solely of his education. And yet the young man and his beloved could no longer shake off this thought. They did not see each other at all in 1994. Emmanuel studied in the center of Paris, while Brigitte continued to teach at La Providence. At first, she thought that their shameful infatuation would quickly pass, but it turned out that the young man was serious about his words. He called her every day, and Brigitte, as if forgetting that there was a 16-year-old teenager on the other end of the line, talked to him for hours. Gradually, he achieved what I could no longer resist. It was incredible. He was really willing to wait, the woman recalled. A year later, she began to visit him regularly in Paris under various pretexts. Emmanuel graduated from school with top marks and enrolled in a one-year preparatory course for university. Around the same time, he turned 18. The romance with Brigitte was no longer forbidden for him. In the capital, no one could dictate to them. Studies gradually gave way to love, which quite likely is why Emmanuel kept failing his entrance. Exams for the next 2 years, but the young man was truly happy. The new love consumed Brigitte as well. Back in her native Amiens, every other person already knew about the affair. According to locals, many of Madame Auzière's old friends turned away from her during this period, considering her a corrupter of an innocent boy. Emmanuel's parents fared no better. Respected doctors, they suddenly became a laughingstock, treated as though they were infected with the plague. In Amiens, the future president's beloved would constantly feel like an outcast. Those years were extremely hard for her, but there was no turning back. At last, the very last to learn of Brigitte's infidelity was her husband, André Louis. For him, the revelation was a devastating blow. When he learned the truth, her husband fell into a rage, writes Maël Brun, the author of the latest biography of Brigitte Macron. to be replaced by his daughter's classmate, an ordinary teenager he himself had welcomed into his home. That is a wound not easily healed. André Louis never forgave the betrayal. He left the house at once, leaving Brigitte to explain everything to her children alone. She would only obtain a divorce in 2006. In every person's life, there comes a moment when you have to make a vital choice, Brigitte Macron, by then already the First Lady of France, explained in an interview with Elle. In a single second, everything that has happened to you over the past 20 years loses any meaning. For 10 years, Brigitte and Emmanuel loved each other in defiance of the whole world. In 1998, the young man finally managed to enter the prestigious Sciences Po, then continued his studies at Paris-Nanterre University, and in the 2000s moved to Strasbourg to earn a degree in business administration. From then on, Brigitte was always by his side. Unlike André Louis, she took joy in supporting Emmanuel's ambitions, for he remained in love with her like a schoolboy. After a year, after 5 years, and even after 10. It was then, 10 years later, that 29-year-old Emmanuel finally resolved to propose to his former teacher. By then, Brigitte was 54. Her children had also grown up and set off on their own paths, eventually forgiving their mother for pursuing her happiness. The couple married at the town hall, the very same place where, back in 1974, Brigitte had wed for the first time. Emmanuel publicly thanked everyone for accepting what he called a not quite normal couple. The newlyweds settled in Brigitte's family villa in Le Touquet, which today is periodically open to tourists. In 2014, by then an experienced analyst, Emmanuel rose to the post of Minister of Finance, and together with Brigitte, they moved to Paris, where she continued teaching for her own pleasure. At that moment, their relationship once again became the subject of public scrutiny and criticism. And when the charming finance minister announced his decision to run for president, the level of public misogyny directed at Brigitte exceeded all bounds. Yet, just as 30 years earlier, France's most unconventional couple managed to withstand the storm of hatred and in the end irreversibly win over the majority of the country. Now Emmanuel and Brigitte triumphantly take their place in the Elysée palace.